morning to everybody. I'm just going to kick off on a couple of things that I experienced last week, and so there's no presentation or slides, so I do apologize for this. Typical Monday morning, so let's get going. So today I just want to touch on complaints, and again we can throw in a couple of things if we have the answers as we're going through this, or any other sort of things that are on your mind, issues that possibly you would like to see in terms of business 101. Just throw them into that chat, and we'll be able to go through and deal with what's going on. So for me, complaints. I think last week I had 4 complaints that have come through, and there was a trend. The trend being that the communication between the plumber and the consumer just isn't there. It was very one-sided in terms of the consumer, continuous emails, WhatsApps, etc., coming through, and basically the plumber not responding. So, again, when I do these type of presentations and people tell me or ask me, how do you deal with a complaint? And I always go back to a fire. If you put out a fire when it's small, it's quite easy and you get it dealt with, and then the risk is basically taken away. But the more you leave that fire, the bigger it grows, and the more issues it brings in and. So again, and I think we've all been customers, we all are customers, and I think that we expect fairly good service. And let's agree that, not all complaints are valid. It's maybe a perception, it's maybe it's something very small. It might be a manufacturer's issue, but that client's not going to know that until we actually sit down and explain it to them. So this client has obviously gone out of their way. They found you in whichever forum that they found you. You've now done the job, and a couple of days, weeks later, there's an issue, and they send it through. And most of what I see, it's actually quite a nice hi, hello, just to let you know there's a leak or there's a problem, and then it goes south. Either the plumber's too busy or he just gets that point of ignoring. That point of ignoring now becomes that fire. And then the second email or WhatsApp or whatever becomes an issue. And then the third one, by now, the client is really irate, and then we start to see the threatens, people being threatened. And then it's, I'm going to go to this, and I'm going to put it on Facebook, and I'm going to do all these necessary things or unnecessary things. And I think the key thing for me is, I don't quite know if companies actually have a complaints procedure within the company. And I think we had Bianca a couple of months ago. She talked about that. And, I think it's something to look within ourselves and say, do we have a complaints procedure? Who is that complaints person? What is the procedure in terms of how we do it? So often, and even in myself, in terms of my businesses in the past, is that, when you got that phone call and by chance, you forgot, oh, geez, there's the number, but you answer it anyway. And they start having a go at you. You're not equipped to be able to deal with that thing. You're driving or you're going into a meeting. You don't have all the information at hand. So again, it's that communication. I can't deal with that right now, but as soon as I get back to the office, I'll get all the facts, and then we'll be able to go and have a look at it. Now, that's all fair and well saying that, but it's actually putting it into action when you get back to your office. And then again, when you're in the office, just go through the details, get the facts, and then be positioned to be able to say, yes, there is an issue, or go back or take it from there, depending on what that complaint is. One last week was like an emergency job, and again, we all know emergency jobs. There's no fixed, right, give me a price, it's 10,000 Rand. It's normally just look, let's just get in, get it sorted out. And then when the job's done and it's all working very well, here comes the issue, the bill. Then that starts unpacking. Why did you charge me so many call outs? Why did you mark up on this? And then that in itself becomes a challenge. And then in terms of this particular complaint, the homeowner had documented the time that the plumbers were on site, and the plumber was just on a little bit of a wishy-washy in terms of that. So when they started correlating information and putting it together, the plumber was found wanting in terms of the specifics of how much time he was on site, which then created a further problem. And now the client doesn't want to pay. So again, going back to that documentation, making sure that you have that information before, confirm all the details of the plumbers. I know some of my guys would pop off somewhere, go and do some private stuff, and try and hide an hour here or there. And again, it comes out in the wash later on. So when that complaint comes through, equip yourself, get the information, and be able to be rational. So I can go from 0 to 530 seconds, but I think sometimes it's be able to look down, just to become calm and just say, ma'am, As soon as we get back with all the information, we'll try and sort it out. And I think the one thing for me is that, in terms of people, we get those that complain, and it might be, 1 out of 10 complaints. And it's to start looking at it and saying, well, hold on, maybe we need to listen to this person that's complaining, because I think they are talking in terms of the others that won't even bother to phone you back. So it's how we actually make our business better. So even from a complaint, it can be a real positive for your business in terms of how you react, how you do things, and making sure that you tick all the boxes. I think when Bert Wiening was in last week, we were looking at different companies, but sometimes we actually don't look at ourselves and say, how are we? How do we measure? In terms of the way in which we deal with our customer. That customer's got a choice. They can go anywhere. They can really go anywhere to provide their work, and it's up to us to retain those customers. There was an old saying that if you lose one customer, I mean the amount and the cost to go through to get another customer in there to replace them is very costly. So in terms of retaining customers, I think we need to go the extra mile. And again, I'm not saying that they're always right, is to be able to go and say, look, what can we do differently? How did we make this mistake? And I'll never forget, a couple of years ago, I found one of our big sort of tap manufacturers, and we had an issue on site, and I wanted to fight. I had enough of the client phoning me, and I was just done, and I wanted to fight. And when I phoned the manufacturer and their representative, he just took all the fight out of me when he said, how can we make it better? That was his stance. After I told him and I was venting a bit, it was just, how do I make it better? What can we do? And that all of a sudden just broke the whole sort of aggro from me, is that I was expecting this huge big fight and issue, and I actually wanted to fight. But it ended up that, by working together, taking responsibility. I mean, we do have things that go wrong, and sometimes we go on the defensive and we go, blame somebody else, or somebody else did it. But in this instance, when that was basically said to me, straight away, there was no fight. It was all out of me. And we went forward and basically getting the situation rectified. So I think attitude comes in. What is your attitude in terms of that? Sometimes we take a complaint very personal. It can be really like a sharp stick in the eye for you in terms of that sort of taking a complaint personally. Let's be real. We do make mistakes. The next one, in terms of your attitude, in terms of you have that. So if you have my attitude where you're going to have this huge big fight with the particular person, that becomes a bit of an issue in terms of, because we tend to fend off each other. So if one raises their voice, then you raise your voice, and before you know it, the complaint's gone totally left, and that's become very personal. So I've seen it all too often in terms of the way in responses, WhatsApp messages, threats that come through WhatsApp messages, and trying to rectify that type of thing becomes a huge problem when that written word's already down there. And then accountability. I mean, I think we need to look at it and say, we have worked there. Not everything is as it is, but rather come out to site or go and see how it is, get the facts. And if you are accountable and it is a problem, then let's be man enough or lady enough to say, look, I'm really sorry. Let's take responsibility for it, and then go and get it sorted out. In terms of reputation of the company, reputation is something that you need to hold on that pedestal. A lot of businesses are built on their reputation, and I think if you have a reputation of being hard and fair in terms of where you are, but have the correct procedures in place to be able to manage any type of complaints or whatever, then certainly that in itself puts you in good stead when it comes to taking responsibility for any issues that you have. But then in terms of communication, as I've said earlier, the way in which some of these SMSs that come through, or WhatsApps or emails, it just becomes so personal that you cringe when you actually read these. And that's not only coming from the plumber, it also comes from the consumer who's threatening to put this on Facebook and this and Instagram and everything else. And I think in today's age, it's certainly challenging in my day when we went out there, we had drums and smoke signals and everything else. So it would take quite a while for the bush telegraph to get out there. But in today's age, I mean, you got to be so protective over your business and what it is that you do, because within seconds, they can put a picture or something on a group that then goes on to another group. And before you know it, the reputation that you've built in terms of your business is destroyed. And it's a real issue. I mean, we've seen some various things in the press where, an individual makes a mistake or in his private side, and before you know it, it is everywhere. And if you're going to have doing that, it becomes a problem. I had somebody the other day that phoned me and said, oh, if you're going to have a look at Hello Peter, how many complaints are against that company on Hello Peter? Now that's out there, it stays there, it becomes a problem. So I think for us, the first thing is to make sure that we're doing everything as good as we can, and then learning how to come out with these things. And then what is the outcome? What is the outcome that we're looking for? Businesses are built on reputation, strong foundation, doing good work, fair work. We're not saying do it cheap, but doing it fair. And as soon as it goes out there, you can't get that stuff back. It's like, years ago, my son, when he was about 3 or 4, I could see him throwing the stone. And it's one of those ones where you actually think, geez, he wished he had a piece of string attached to that, because it's going right for the plate glass window. And you could just see it. But once it had left his hand, there was absolutely nothing that he was going to do to stop that hitting the window. And a lot of what we do in terms of our business is exactly the same thing, where we sometimes shoot from the hip, and I've done it. Trust me, guys and ladies, I've been the first one to rev or get in my car when a client says, I'm going to murder you. And I say, geez, don't say that, my man. I got your address right in front of me and I'm on my way. So we do that, and we got to try and learn from that. So I think sometimes to take our emotions out of it when they attack our staff or they do things that are just unacceptable. But it's just to try and make sure that we actually got a procedure. So when I was young and reckless, that was the type of attitude that I had. And then I had to start sort of slowing down, having to look at both sides of the coin, listening in terms of when I was wrong and when I was right. Well, then I was right. But I had the facts to back that up. Then I still had to start putting things in place, like making sure that those complaints procedures are dealt with in the correct manner, making sure that our attitude was right, making sure that we were accountable, making sure that our reputation was protected. And all businesses that are out there have had some challenges. If you go and speak to some businesses that have been out there 10, 15, 20 years, they'll give you some horror stories in terms of situations that they've had to handle and how they've been able to overcome that. So that in itself is a learning curve for us. So we need to just go and have a look at that. And then obviously, what is the outcome that we want? Sometimes the client just wants to vent and just tell you how bad you are. And if your attitude is correct and you apologize if you were right or wrong or whatever that may be, you may retain that customer. Some customers are, no matter what you do, they're just really not going to come right. And I read a book a couple of years ago where they said, can you fire a customer? And one of the companies that I work for in Durban said, yes, by all means. They would just have a look at an individual and say, for the amount of work that we receive from this individual, as opposed to the amount of complaints and moaning and groaning that we get with it, maybe it's a decision choice to actually take away and say, please, you're welcome to go and get somebody else and let them experience that. So in terms of where we are, these were just some notes, and I apologize again that I just threw together at 5 to 7 in the morning. So we've managed to get through 16 minutes of it, but again, not to take away from the fact that we are trying to look at this. Business is hard right now. We're finding more and more individuals dropping rates just to try and get the work. We're then finding guys dropping rates, but increasing on the hidden end of it in terms of markups and materials and everything else. If it's defendable and it's there, that's really not a problem. But when I start to see things coming across, unfortunately, they're not from our IOPSA members. A lot of these complaints that I receive are from non-members, but we have to deal with it in terms of coming through our complaints portal. And when I start to see them and I start getting that information coming through, then it starts to become another side of the coin, where the guys may be taking a valve that was 800 Rand and made it 1,700 Rand and then charged 500 Rand for sundries, and they start to embellish these costs. So again, from an IOPSA point of view, we don't necessarily get involved in the costing side of things. I mean, there is not, and we can't, because of it being, they would construe that as being price fixing. But I mean, we know the average in terms of what the plumbers charge throughout the country. So our response would be that they've charged sort of in line with the guidelines of the Institute of Plumbing, whatever the case may be. But when you start to see materials inflated, when you have a look at pictures of jobs and you see what half that material wasn't utilized there, that becomes a challenge, because when it's with our desk now, we have to action it. We have to ask the questions of the individuals. And I had one last week where it was a sort of statement made, well, I charged that. It broke while we were on site. And so, yeah, I charged them for it. But, the client didn't break it. The plumber had broken it. And therefore, he deemed it fit that while he was messing around there, that component being 500-600 Rand wasn't broken by the client, but he felt because he had purchased it, because he was installing it and his guys broke it, that he could still charge for it. So that became quite a bit of an issue in terms of that particular job, in trying to determine who was right and who was wrong. If you purchase something for a job and your guys break it, what do you guys do? What do you guys and ladies do? Do you put that down to the school of hard knocks, or do you charge the client for it? And if you do charge the client for it, is that right or is that wrong?
The responses are, we break, we pay for it, not the client. So okay, I cover 100%. The cost if it's my fault, just on principle.
Okay, now that's a real great, response that I was looking for, because, again, this was not the norm for this individual. And can you imagine if you had put your car into for a service and the oak dropped the plug or broke something, and then when you saw your invoice, you saw those, instead of there being 6 spark plugs, there was 7 or whatever. You go, well, what happened? No, the mechanic busted that one, but anyway, it was for your car, so we just charge you for it. That in itself, we as plumbers or business people would have an absolute fit if that happened to us. So if that is how we would be in terms of our response, and I'm really glad about those responses. But this particular individual was adamant that he's not paying for it. It was for their job, and therefore they can pay for it. So well done to all of those that responded. Thank you, Karim. If there's any questions that we want to kick off with.
Yes, so we do have here from Kurt for Mark. So he said, so true, Steve. It is important to take the emotion out of it. Sometimes don't react immediately and just take a few minutes for the blood level to subside before reacting.
Yeah, well done, Kurt. I think Kurt was on a couple of weeks ago and he was talking about that being a professional. And I think it's so much true what you say there, Karim, is that, if you take that emotion out of it, don't make it personal. And I think it's one of those things that we don't know, is those soft skills, is to try and impart that. We taught to be plumbers, we taught to work with our hands, we problem solvers. But then when a problem does come along in terms of how do you communicate that to the consumer? And I've seen it once or twice where the WhatsApp will be like, yeah, okay, I'll have a look at it. And then, the next thing it goes totally south, then there's swear words and there's this. And, before you know it, and some of them, the ones that I receive you'll look at it and cringe and want to go and find a hole to go in. But once it's out there, it's out there. I've had plumbers sending, and as I say, not so much from members, but I've had plumbers at 8, 9 o'clock at night threatening the client. Now we get that. Yeah, and let's go back to the reality of that. That is a situation. He might not have been paid that day. And I know when I was running my business, when I kicked off, is that we worked Monday to Thursday. Friday was just spent chasing money with the promises of getting it, and we were really struggling. And you're trying to get the money in to pay wages or pay whatever you're doing. And then when somebody didn't pay you, you got that disappointment, or you got to tell your staff, hey, sorry, my man, we can't pay you today, but maybe next week. And then it becomes very personal, because now they put you in a position that you really shouldn't be in. And that's it. So you were working 4 days a week. Friday was chasing money, all that pressure. And then somebody just phones you up to complain, and you lose your absolute joy out of it. So I think it's like Kurt says, we need to just try and put it in perspective. We need to just look at it and say, hold on, this is where we are. And I think the key thing is treating people as you would like to be treated. So, if you enjoy that, what do you want, whatever, chase your clients away, well, that's an issue that you need to deal with. But I think for me, I tend to go to places that support me, where I walk in, and they call it that customer experience, where you're walking into a shop and you want to be in that shop. Why? Because they make you feel good. They make you feel like you're special, that you are the #1 person in terms of that particular moment. And you're gonna support them. I drive past 4 chemists to get to one, and I've been supporting them for ages, and I won't change because I've got that personal relationship. They know me, I know them, I can phone them anytime, get my stuff. So again, it's building that reputation. Sorry, Kareem, next one.
All right, so the next question is linked to last week's session with Kurt. So the question is, do we have a format of calculating the amount to charge for distance traveled?
Yes, there is. Okay, so if you go on to App Plumber, there is an actual very nice calculator there in terms of working out your call out fee and your travel fee. So if you go on to App Plumber, it's there. It really is a nice sliding scale in terms of what it is. So App Plumber, it is available. Go on there, have a look, and you'll be able to calculate your travel. And it takes everything into consideration. Trust me, Lee Smith did a wonderful job in putting that together. And it's a baseline, but I see it all the time. We're running around, and a lot of those costs we don't build into our business. Our petrol, wear and tear, tires, servicing, depreciation, all of those things get built in. And there is a lovely explanation, in terms of how you work that out and getting back to that rate. Next one, Kareem.
All right, perfect. So this question is, I believe, something that has happened to the attendee. So the question is, the COC inspector came out, made his notes, and sent the refix email, then went and fixed what was on the email, then came and said, well, there was this and this not done, but on website under COC audit, it says one must fix what's on the email. What happens next?
All right, so Kareem, if I can just ask that individual, in terms of that. So from what I've got there in terms of the COC, so I don't have all the details there, but certainly if that individual would like to give me a call and give me the COC number, then I'll go back and have a look at it. So, again, if you submitted your certificate of compliance and you've noted all of those items that were pre-existing before you went, then, it's the auditor's duty to go out there, take the information that you've submitted on your COC, what's on site, and it should come back to where they should all line up. So if you wouldn't mind, afterwards, Kareem, just give my number if they would give me a ring with that, and sort that out. I don't know what it means and went and fixed it. Are you saying the auditor went and fixed it, or did you have to go and fix it? So there's a little bit of a gray area there, but please let me know. Next one, Kareem.
Perfect. So the next question is, hi, 2 weeks ago, I gave a client a drain estimation of plus minus to unblock a drain on Thursday. We spent 3 hours and had to go back on Friday, spent another 4 hours. The machine had to make other plans. All right, so I believe he says maybe the client had to make other plans, eventually opened. Now she kept to the first amount, but she knows we spent a lot of time on it.
Yeah, I think, Kareem, that is, and I think we all like that. So I think if I would ask people, if I gave you a price of between 5,000 and 10,000, then, we'd all sink in at that 5,000. And it's one of those complaints that I receive in terms of an estimate, okay, in terms of where that is. And it goes back to that communication, where those jobs are going up. And we know for drains and that type of thing, we can't quote on them because we just don't know how long they're going to be. So again, it won't be the first or the last time that a plumber's been involved in a job and just carried on and on and on. And then, it's just unraveled and gone back. And then, as I'm saying, is that all of a sudden they go, well, hold on, how did you get to this particular rate? So again, it's just trying to work that out. Those plus minuses or estimates are rather challenging because, as I've said, if I had to say 2 words here, 5,000, 10,000, that's the estimate or the ballpark that you're in, then that client will be at the 5,000. They just tend to do that. So in terms of where you are, is being very specific in terms of what it is that you're doing. So again, for me, it would be the call out. It would be the first hour with the machine, whatever. And most drains, we should be able to open up within an hour if we've got the correct machinery and everything else. But it gets back to that communication in terms of, right, we can carry on or we go to our next step in which to open it. And then that's a cost in terms of opening that drain. And then once it's open, it's okay, now we understand what the problem is. Now it's a cost to now repair and then backfill and make good. So it's just a bit of a step in terms of how you break that down. That's how I would do it. And I know a lot of clients out there in terms of what they get, they say, but the plumber said it would be 5 and I've got 8 or 9 or 10 or it's doubled. And that's where it comes in terms of just a little bit or no communication coming through.
Okay, perfect. And just one last statement for the session. Eugene Vermaak here, good morning. I have come across the scenario where the plumber has to pay if any material is broken on site. The plumber is liable.
Thank you, Eugene. Yeah, I think that's just a confirmation. You know, I've never, you know, I'm not saying it doesn't happen out there, but I mean, for me, it was actually quite a statement. And I think this one is where this whole thing unraveled, you know, where, you know, all of a sudden the clients get a detailed breakdown, you know, of the bill. And, you know, again, there was another issue. And this becomes another problem, guys, is that when we don't respond to that first fire, and we start putting the client on the back burner and we don't go, depending on the nature of the problem, you know, the client is quite within their rights if they've asked you and advised you to come through and you know, come and ascertain the problem or whatever. But then they go get another plumber out there, excuse me, and then we know what happens there. Oh boy, that new plumber coming in there just sees a blank check here. You know, he's just going to go in and again, when we talk about ethics, he'll come in there, oh, this is wrong, I have to take that out. And then they go on the basis of that information that's been provided by the second plumber, which now makes your issue even worse. So it's just to be careful in terms of how we do that, in terms of how we communicate. I mean, we're all professionals, and, you know, if it's right, it's right. It's right. If it's an issue, then no problem. But to go in and start, you know, clubbing baby seals when, you know, that plumber's not there to defend himself, and we're saying plumbers, you know, we're not talking about somebody who's running around pretending to be one, but let's just try and build it up. I think for me, building your own business up on the back of others with regards to putting them down, calm as a bit of a bitch, it does have a way of coming back to bite at you. And again, I received a job once because I was quite honest when they were sitting there saying, you know, what do you think of this guy? And I'm going, you know what? We all have our problems. We all have good jobs or bad jobs. It's just how we deal with them that makes them different. And you take a bad job and you can turn it into a positive, you know. So also look at that from building your reputation, your accountability attitude, is that you can really take a bad situation and turn it into good. And I think that's where I'd like to end it.